Thank you, everyone, for coming out. My name is Mualimm-ak. I've done over 40,000 hours in solitary confinement in New York State, a little over 5 years. I would like for everyone to just imagine for a moment. If you can close your eyes and imagine where I lived uh, for many years upon years upon years of my life. Imagine a space the size of your bathroom, but no amenities in there. You're allowed to have t-shirts, underwears, boxers, socks, and a jumpsuit. Imagine when your children come to visit you, they come to the door, but you're not allowed to touch them or see them. You can only hear their voices in some sense. Imagine that every meal is pushed through this small slot like your mail slot in the front of your house. Imagine when you cry out for medical attention like I did when I was pleading for insulin, being diabetic. I have to get my slots through the food slot, my shots through the food slot. Imagine that being denied. Imagine hearing someone in the bathroom next door who has seizures, falling off his bed, falling on the floor. Imagine hearing the footsteps of people walking by, but ignoring your cries. Imagine that for 45 minutes to an hour every day, they open the shower curtain and that area is your rec area. Imagine living in that space for years upon years upon years. Now imagine that person being held there, being an average ninth grader, being a child. I was not a child, but I can see the effects that happen to me permanently. I have permanent emotional damage, permanent psychological damage. My heart is racing right now as I stand here and speak to you. But these are the conditions that cause permanent damage. But imagine a child going through that permanent damage. Someone who's in the peak of their developmental stages. Someone who's missing their parents' guidance because out in the world, they're not an adult. In the world, they're going to high school. They just got a bus pass. They're thinking about video games and new sneakers. But inside, they're worth thousands of dollars. Inside, they're an adult. Inside, they're treated and punished like an adult. My heart goes out to others because as I spent years in different facilities, I've seen children come in that were my son's age. I myself am a parent. I used to be called father, brother, uncle. But now I'm just known by a number. And I'm not allowed any human rights. People don't understand what it is to be in solitary. If you don't mind, I want to take a moment to kind of briefly explain this to you. You have to kind of think about how do we use our senses, right? Because sensory deprivation is what solitary confinement is. How do we use our senses to communicate? Our sight, our touch, our hearing, right? These are our God-given rights. And we use this since childhood. This is what we're taught by our parents how to communicate. And then you go to deprivation, which is the side of depriving a person of all those human rights. A person's brain goes under attack, and imagination starts to fill in where facts are in your brain. You start to talk to yourself, but what do you do beyond the time of counting all the cracks in the wall, right? What do you do after you count all the bolts in the floor and how to paint strokes in the wall, right? What do you do after the wind that comes under the door starts sounding like voices after a while? What do you do when you're revoked by your own scent, where you have a beard that's been growing for so long it just irritates you, but you never see in your face because you're not allowed any reflective services? You forget what your children look like because you're not allowed to have the photos of them. You don't have reading material because nobody's sending you anything. And if they do send you the wrong book, you're going to get more time. What do you do when you're denied medical, mental, physical help? Well, that's what I came out to do, to make a change. I'm a part of the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement, as many people who are family members and also victims of solitary confinement torture. Why do I say it's torture? Because for 90 days I was put on a food torture, which I would like to invite everyone to taste the loaf. The loaf is a punitive damage in New York State, which is a food torture, which drains your system. It's made of rotten cabbage and baked bread. It's about the size of a meal that you'll get twice, 3 times a day, the size of your cell phone. And that is what you're allowed to eat. But as I come from New York State has many forms of torture. But we are united and we're fighting, we're making progress. Recently, the New York Civil Liberties Union had a settlement, which affects a small population of people, which will relieve a good amount of pressure. It is a first step. It is not as complete as the Solitary Confinement Act, which is now going on, which is actually presented by Assemblyman Aubrey in the Assembly and Senator Perkins in the state. But this will fundamentally change the way that we respond to problematic behavior, because that's what really solitary confinement is, right? We use solitary every day. When your kids act up, you send them in the room on timeout, right? But a parent who cares will go into that room a little while later and say, what happened? It is a perfect opportunity to address the issue of a person's misbehavior or disciplinary actions. But when we use this fundamentally as a first response to every problematic behavior, I went to solitary for having too many pencils in my cell, having too many postage stamps. I received a magazine from a friend of mine that was considered someone else's property. But as I stayed there, I received slew of tickets. One day I received the apple in solitary, and I wasn't supposed to eat the apple core because in New York State, apple seeds contain arsenic, and you're not allowed to eat that. So they gave me a ticket for that. So fearful, and the next day I didn't eat the apple. And then they gave me another ticket for refusing to eat. And ticket after ticket, I remained there for 5 years. 5 years away from my family, away from my children. But this is what we do every day, and the change has to come from us. So I come here today momentarily to describe these conditions and hope that you support these changes in New York and support these changes in California. Because if we don't make the change, we're talking about destroying human lives. And this is what we do. Even though we go to other countries and say, this is what you shouldn't do. But let's start looking in our own backyards, because we are at a point of a spiritual and human crisis, and we need to make change. I thank you for your time. Thank you.